Good morning, and welcome to the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce's 10th installment in this series, COVID-19, What Lies Ahead, with an open discussion on social media and brand marketing. I am John Welch, Executive Director of the Brazilian American Chamber, and on behalf of the Chamber, we wish you all health and safety in this difficult time. Online marketing and branding have taken center stage in recent years, but especially now since the onset of COVID-19. The next edition of our webinar series, and Next Steps, brings together successful marketers to discuss brand communication, best practices, what not to do, and the role of social media. Today we have Bruna Bechelli of TBWA, and Fernando Barretto of Letgo to discuss how the world of marketing has changed and what the future bodes. Our moderator today is Renata Comeaux, the co-founder of R2CW. Renata has extensive experience in events and marketing in the consumer, financial, oil and gas, and nonprofit sectors. She has worked at Nabisco, Coca-Cola, Saúde, Itaú BBA, where we were colleagues, and Guggenheim Partners. She has a successful track record of well-executed fundraisers, conferences, investor days, investor trips, road shows, dinners, and entertainment. She then co-founded R2CW in 2016 and since works with clients in banking, tech, telecom, food, and the beverage sectors. She holds a bachelor's degree in business studies from PUC Rio in Brazil and a master's degree in marketing from the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology in the United Kingdom. You can find the full bios of all the panelists on the invitation link on the BACC website. Before turning the screen over to Renata, I would ask you to please use the Q&A tab for questions. You can make them at any time, and we will look to answer them after our guest comments during the Q&A period. Thank you very much. Renata? And don't forget to...
Sorry, guys, I was mute. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chamber, for inviting me to moderate this edition of the webinar series on COVID-19, the open discussion on social media and brand marketing. And we have the pleasure of having here with us Fernando Barretto and Bruna Bechelli. Fernando is the Director of Brand Marketing for Letgo. He has over 15 years of marketing and advertising experience. He's worked at iconic agencies such as CB&B and Deutsche LA, and with clients across a multitude of industries. He has spent the last 4 years at the tech startup Letgo, which is the mobile innovation arm of OLX. He is the global brand director in charge of all communication, including social and digital media. Bruna Bechelli moved to New York just over a year ago, and she's the business lead at TBWA Chai Day, where she works on iconic brands such as PepsiCo and the Hilton Hotels. She started her advertising career in Brazil with brands including ABN AMRO Bank, Natura, and Diageo. In 2009, she decided to travel the world, and after living a while in Barcelona, she fell in love with London, where she stayed for 10 years, working for ad agencies like CP&B, JWT, on brands including Unilever, BMW, Hotels.com, and ABI. So Fernando and Bruna will present and have a discussion, an open discussion. And in the end, as John already said, we'll have the Q&A. Feel free to put your questions on the Q&A box during the discussion, and I'll look at them and make sure I'll ask them in the end. So thank you and welcome, Fernando and Bruna.
Thank you for inviting. It's great.
Thank you, Renata, for the introduction. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it's a bank holiday, so thanks for making the effort to, just to be here and listen and hear from us. Today, we've been quarantined for 3 months at least here in the US, and it's been tough, God. And we'll obviously remember the people that were by our side during this time and really helping us get through it. And the same works for brands. We will remember the brands that were there, that helped the community, that helped us, somehow was part of our lives during this time. So today we put together this presentation like with some guidelines, principles, examples, things that you shouldn't be doing, and to give you an inspiration of how you could apply these things to your brands. So you can come out of this crisis stronger somehow. We will come out of it stronger. So I'll pass it on to Fernando, and he will kick us off.
Cool. Thanks, Bruna. Thanks, everybody, for having me. Bruna and I worked together when she worked at CPB through London, and I was already at Letgo, so there's a lot of history here. It's a great opportunity to be presenting this to you. And like she was saying, we have some examples. A lot of thinking that we see work that we like, her from an agency side and me from a client side. And this is supposed to be a discussion, it's none of this is gospel or, 100% correct. It's kind of like what our opinion is. And we have some data in here that backs that up. So, looking forward to going through it and talking you guys through it. So, what we know is that this is a humanitarian crisis first and an economic crisis second. I think it's kind of interesting that I'm saying that phrase in a room full of finance professionals. So that's interesting. But we believe that if you do right by the humans, the economic benefits should follow, right? And it is a decisive moment for brands, right? How all these brands' behavior is going to dictate their future. There is already a lot of momentum around what we call cancel culture. That if a brand is acting in ways that they are not contributing to the community, social media goes crazy, and there's a lot of potential economic problem that could happen from it. One of the easiest examples that just happened now is that Ivanka Trump was, she was given a commencement address, and then, Twitter went crazy and she was asked not to attend anymore. So it's a real thing and it could have impact. Then, we know that the marketing rules, which are traditionally self-serving and to drive a specific economic benefit, no longer apply. So what we put together is really like a kind of a guide or a roadmap that should allow you to see, okay, what are the steps that I need to take in order to navigate through the crisis? So 1, 2, 3, what do people need at this moment? What principles, and we give those things to you here. What principles are guiding our actions? And then, what should we do and where to start? We have a number of examples here that you guys could be able to adapt to your own brand, and at least something to start the thinking. I think that one important piece that sets the context around this is you can go back to the next slide, Bru. Is really looking at how the context changes and what really do people need at this moment. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about how we need to address a different part of the user needs, right? So where usually brands talk about aspirational needs, and we're always trying to place our brand as like something that's of value from an emotional perspective, we now need to start talking about what are at the bottom of the pyramid. What are the physiological needs? What are safety and security needs? And where are love and belonging needs, which are more basic needs. So brands need to rapidly adapt the ways that they're creating value, right? So if you look at, how can we shift? You can go to the next slide, Bru. You can go to look at how you can shift the physiological behavior to really helping people stay home, to facilitating local conversations, or giving tools to your community, right? So one of the examples here, helping people stay home, we can look at Apple, because they, we show that example later in the presentation, right? Shot at home, shot on iPhone 6, and then a hashtag at home, right? So they're helping people stay home. Facilitating local conversations. I think there is an amazing interview from Brian Chesky, who is the founder and CEO of Airbnb, right? And how they looked at the behavior changing from China and then from Europe and then through the US. And the bookings that are happening now are much more local bookings. So how can you facilitate that local conversation with your user base to adapt to the things that are changing. And then how do you give tools to your community in order to help them navigate through that, right? I think that a good example for it is how yoga studios or wine tasting, virtual wine tasting are all happening via Zoom. So Zoom became a tool to help guide the community. Next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about what are these principles, right? And how do we shift from what usually guides us to where we want to be? So there's a list here of some of the things that that we talk about and that roots really the actions that that we're doing, right? So it's not something that is gospel. You shouldn't take it and apply it to every single idea, but it's a good point to start, right? And I like to say that we need to have at least 4 of these in any initiative, but definitely start with one of these principles anytime that you're putting something out there into the world. I'm going to go through a couple of them here so you guys can see, you know, empathy and generosity, utility and agility, making acts, not ads. So how do you really take something that you usually use as budget for communication and make it for something that's going to benefit your community, that is really going to put your philosophy and your brand to act on a specific principle that's creating value to that community, right? Do it your way. I think that one of the important pieces that you should take away from today's presentation is how do you take some of the examples that we have here, because the examples are going to be, you know, from a breadth of industries, but usually they're established brands, right? Coca-Cola, there's Apple, Airbnb, all these examples are from big companies, but it's all unique to who they are as a brand and what are the principles that are guiding their behavior, right? So make sure that you take this all as input and then put that filter on how do you do that your way in order to add value to your specific community. But always keep in mind that you're not necessarily addressing that top of the Maslow pyramid as a behavior. It's not the aspirational piece, it's the more utilitarian piece. And what are you doing to cover those hierarchy of needs, you know, physiological, love and belonging, and safety and security? How can your brand help, you know, give the coverage to these needs in this time, which is the primary behavior of consumers? How can you get that done through a brand lens, through your brand lens, right? So this is kind of the context, and I know that it feels like it's very from a psychology user behavior perspective. I think Bru is going to talk a little bit of why does it make sense for you to continue to invest. Then we're going to break into like what are these themes, right? What are how are the principles guiding some themes and examples, and we're going to talk through that. And then we're going to bring up like some of the things that you shouldn't do or that didn't fit those principles and some examples so you guys can kind of see how we are thinking about it. And then we bring it in a little bit down to, you know, how does social media play a role in this, and how can you do, because it brings down an altitude and especially barrier for entry. So Bru is going to talk a little bit why does it make sense for us to continue to invest and where we should start. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Fed. So one thing is for sure, like strong brands, they recover quicker. So it makes sense to keep investing right now. However, like when we invest and when we put a message out there, we need to make sure that that message makes sense and that message is really true to your brand principles and all the principles that Fed just talked us through. Consumers have an adverse reaction to self-promoted ads during moments of crisis. Like this is something that we cannot do. And I'm going to show to you a video that consumers put together, and it's on the internet, it's online, but it just shows how they are seeing brands that are just putting any message out there. So I'm going to play here. I hope it works. Let's see.
We are a brand, and we want you to know that we care about you, the consumer, the capitalist herd of buyers, of hoarders, of look-at-meers. These times are tough, and it's important you see us as understanding that. But in truth, we have no idea. But we keep that to ourselves. Otherwise, you won't buy our product. Our product that is not at all necessary, especially now, but that we really, really want you to buy. So we hired a sympathetic narrator to make you think we really do care. We use phrases like, "We're all in this together," and "strange and uncertain times." And we even sprinkle in images of babies and strangers gazing thoughtfully into the camera. So please, the next time you go to the store, buy our product. Buy a lot of our product. Spend your stimulus check on it. All of it. We may even donate to a charity or something. Not a lot, but just enough that makes us look like good guys. So here's to you and everything you do for us, the brand, the corporation, the 1%. Thank you.
That's great.
Tough, right? That's that's how people see brands at the moment. So we need to be like really careful with the message we put out there for any brand like that we work with, or like our own brands. So we separated best practices by themes, and I have 10 themes to talk you through. I have to say I had many more, but then I decided to cut it down so I don't overwhelm you with all these best practices. And so I'm going to show you some examples, and at the end, I put some questions just to make you think how you can apply that to your own business. And you may come up with other questions yourselves, but hopefully it's going to be inspirational when you can, go away and think of what are the nice things that you guys can do. So I'll start with ads for goods, which are brands donating paid ad space for public safety and health messaging. So this first example is Reddit's co-founder. He took all the panels from Times Square to put messages for staying home and just encouraging people to stay at home. This was right at the beginning, right? I think now everyone knows that we should stay home, hopefully. This other example is from Space Out. It's from Singapore. It's this website that shows the trends of, how crowded public spaces are, so people can make a choice. Okay, so if this place is very crowded, I should probably not go there right now. I can go later, or I can go somewhere else. So what if you turn your existing media commitments into public service announcement messages? Just extending official messages because you are doing a service to the community and to the people. What if you donated your media directly to a not-for-profit that is working to help people affected by COVID? So really cool things that you could do.
Bru, just real quick on that, what if, right? At Letgo, we have ad inventory that we sell. It's one of the revenue streams. And we did donate to care.org, which is a not-for-profit organization working with the WHO to raise funds for COVID. So that's funny that's in there. So I think it's a really good example.
Well done. That's why we love Letgo. Then the second one is product pivot. So brands that rapidly adapt to their product or service experience to help or to adapt to the impacts of COVID. First example is Instagram. It was really easy. They have this function, which is ask me a question. They quickly changed it to how can I help? So people could your friends, your contacts could just, if they were in need, they could ask you. It's just an open conversation that helps a lot. Sometimes people have a thing and oh, I'm not gonna ask for help. I think if you open that question, that becomes easier. The second one, it's from a brand called Duelito. They started delivering modules of home office to your door. So you can build your own home office in your backyard or your garden cost $9,000, a bit expensive, but hey, if your company wants to send like home offices to your, to your employees, why not? I would love to have one, I have to say. So what if you could change your product to better suit the reality of a world with COVID-19? Is there anything that you guys can do to just to just help people through it, or things that could be, just useful at this time? Okay, next one is big help for small business. Small business are suffering a lot through this crisis, and big brands are helping, there are big brands that are helping them succeed, or just at least live through it. Apple Music is an example. They launched a 50 million advanced royalty fund to ensure that artists will get paid, and the operations are gonna continue. And Spotify, still in the world of music, but they are partnering with charities and giving away 10 million to small artists that struggle with canceled performances. And they are also launching fundraisers, and getting people to direct donate to the artists that they like. So
sorry, one more thing there, Bru. I think it's sorry, I keep interrupting you, but it's a good example too. And what Airbnb did is donated their own funds to the hosts, right? So that's another way that you can spin this. You're taking care of your immediate community, which for them is these super hosts, and they gave back $250 million of cash that they had on hand to their hosts, because the hosts were suffering with cancellation fees. So again, starting with that empathy principle, it starts to guide all these actions.
Cool. So what if your brand become a media platform for a small business, or you ran a dedicated relief campaign to help a small business that are part of your value chain? What if you consider partnering with a small business to drive part of your brand or sales strategy, or you made a commitment to source your goods and services from a small business? Again, this is obviously needs to make sense to the business you are in, right? Spotify is helping artists, Airbnb is helping their hosts. What in your chain of what in your business makes sense for you to, what are the small business around your business that you can help? That's what I mean. So next one is business repurpose. So brands that repurpose their business to help produce supplies. And I think there is a lot of that in the media. I think this is not new for you. The example I have here is Nissan. They started producing masks to help the front line. A lot of brands did that. The next one is ABI or Ambev in Brazil. They start producing hand sanitizers. They normally produce beer and mostly beer and soda, CSDs, and they change their production thing just to start doing hand sanitizer and distributing to people. So what if you could repurpose your core business operation to fill a gap or need that has emerged as a result of COVID? The examples I showed here are mainly health related and frontline related, but there are so many things, so much has changed in our lives. So just think about logistics, home delivery, homeschooling, learning, exercising. There are so many things that we can, that just change right now. Next one is COVID innovation. That's fun. So some brands are treating this epidemic as a new product development brief. So what are the new products that you can create to help fight the virus? This one is something that our agency in Finland did in partnership with one of their clients. They created this door handle where you don't actually, it's a hands-free door handle. So you don't use your hands, and that avoids, that helps avoiding the infection and the spread of the virus. The next one is Fitbit. So all these smart watches, they can tell when you are about to get sick. So they are partnered with Stanford Medicine, and through your body temperature, skin temperature, body temperature, and elevated heart rate, they can tell before you can even tell that you are about to get sick, and they can send you an alert just for you to stay home and take it easy. So what if you reimagine your existing product through the lens of a new purpose? Or you utilize your brand values as a source of inspiration to invent a new product that solves an emergent problem caused by COVID. I think that's where creativity can, really play a role here, and just create something new.
There's another really interesting example that a workout studio developed these kettlebells made out of leather, so they could ship it directly to their members' houses, and then their members' houses would fill it with sand. And with varying sizes and with varying weights, you had kettlebells that were sponsored by the gym that were able to be shipped everywhere for a lot of these people who don't have weights at home to work out because they would always go to the gym. So like you use your brand and your expertise to create a new need, to meet a new need. So I think that that's super interesting.
That's really good. I wish I had received that, Faye. Next one is free for now. So brands that offer all or part of their product services for free as a way to alleviate customers from some of the stress and challenges that COVID is bringing us. And this actually, I think it has a little bit, it's a mixed strategy, because you are helping, you are like doing good to your people, to your customers, but at the same time, you are kind of like creating a habit that in the future, they might be willing to pay for your services because you gave them for free for a while. So U-Haul is offering 1 month of free self-storage to US college students. They got, they had to leave their dorms, and like what could they do with that furniture? Instead of like carrying around with them, like U-Haul gave them storage for free. Nike dropped the subscription fee for their exercising app. Obviously, after that, after you get hooked with exercising, you just keep going, right? So what if you could temporarily give away all or part of your product and service for free, or you applied a freemium pricing model by giving away your core product, but offering up value adds for a cost, So this is very good. This is like not thinking about the short-term returns, but thinking about a long-term strategy for the brand. The next one is No One Left Behind, brands that consider the needs of all their customers and put measures in place to make sure no one misses out. So one very simple example is what the supermarkets are doing. I think this is not in the US, Brazil is doing as well. I know Pão de Açúcar has a very early big time for seniors to go there and make their shop. Here's the same thing, Walmart, Iceland in the UK, they're all doing it. This next example is called Goodnight Zoom. It allows children to connect with isolated senior people and tell them a bedtime story. Imagine like how hard it is for elderly people that live alone, like in these quarantine times. Being able to connect with someone to just like have a chat, it's like, it must be really rewarding and just make them feel good. So what if you reviewed all your customer segments and had a dedicated plan for how each group received equal access and support from your brand? Or you reconsider your customer touch points to consider where you can make it easier for your customers to access.
And that's really even more important now, right? With all of the social unrest, how are you making sure that you're serving the right communities and that you give everybody the same access? So that's super important for you always to keep in mind.
Then customer love. So brands that prioritize customer care over new sales during the response phase of the crisis. So Apple is letting people sign up to defer payments and avoid interest fees. I mean, who doesn't love Apple after that, right? And the same for Ford. So Ford, instead of like just telling people to go to the dealership and buy a new truck, all their advertising is a message saying that they will offer relief for people that have been affected by COVID, who lost their jobs and need help restructuring their payments. So what if you put customer love and care as your #1 priority for the next 3 months? So instead of sales and shareholder value, you just think of like how you win the love of those people. Or you thought of an unexpected positive surprise for your existing customers right now to ease their tensions. Or you evolve your pricing model to enable customers to still get access to some or all of your products and services. Next one is called In This Together, brands that encourage their communities to do the right thing. And that doesn't mean it's the brand itself, but they just make it happen. So I love this example. It's a Netflix's example. These were actually students from advertising students. They create a campaign that of out of home outdoor panels that would give you a spoiler of the most famous shows that are on Netflix right now. So, and that was all to tell people, to encourage people to stay at home, because if they go out, like, they will see the spoiler of their favorite show. I think this is like, it's brilliant. It's annoying. I would be very annoyed if that happened to me, but I think it's just brilliant. Next one is actually from an entrepreneur. It's not from any brand, but he got these ATMs for rice in Vietnam. So people can go to these ATMs and get rice for free twice a day, to make sure that everyone can eat, even if they lost their jobs and they can't afford food at the moment. I mean, how beautiful that is. So what if you become a platform to rally your communities to help and support each other through the crisis? Or you reimagine your existing or planned message now through the lens of what it means to do it in self-isolation? Or you develop an internal program for your employees to let them know we are in this together. So it's everything about your community. So not only your neighborhood, but like your employees, like your colleagues, like the people that you are close with. So I think this is the last one, which is called new transparency. So brands that go the extra length to provide new levels of transparency for increased safety, you know, so people don't get anxious about what's going on. So this one is from China. So people ordering fast food delivery in China, they will be given the temperature, the body temperature of both the person who prepared their food and the one that is delivering it. So you know, like, they are okay, you're safe. This other one is from Citymapper. They release a mobility index tracking movement of people. So you know what are if people are actually starting to go out or not, and like you can make your own decisions based on that. So this GIF is probably not right because this guy is very mean, but like, what if you could provide additional transparency on how your products are prepared to give customer extra peace of mind? Or the data your business already utilized could be helpful to a wider audience at this time. I know, like, privacy, there is a big thing around there, but just think about, like, is there any data that you guys have access that can help anyone else and that it's okay to share? So, okay, that's all cool, but I know it's a lot of work. So Faye's gonna talk to you about the things that you could do right now to drive impact.
Awesome, thanks, Bru. And like we said, right, like, you know, these are examples that are, you can go back to the next slide. These are examples that, oh no, sorry, that one was good. These are examples that guide kind of big brands and major brands on what they're doing for the crisis. But what can you do, and what are the behaviors that are happening right now out there for your users that you can take advantage of? And what we know is that
I'm sorry, Faye, the presentation got played up. What slide do you want? This one? Or?
Yeah, that one. You know, we see how social media is increased during the time of COVID, right? So isolation drives people to find a way to connect, and they do that through social media, be it WhatsApp, be it Facebook, be it, you know, TikTok is the new thing, or Instagram, right? So what does that mean to you? And if you try to talk about it, how social media plays a huge role in people's lives, you look at Brazil, social media is one of the biggest sources of news in the nation, right? So even more accentuated that behavior is in Brazil. So people are always in social media. So you, knowing that digital media and social media are the lowest barriers of entry and the easiest ones to focus in your community, how can you take some of these examples that Bruna kind of laid out for us? There's over 10 in there that have a number of different ways that you can approach this, but how can you take that and put your lens on it and talk directly through to your community in whichever scale you need, right? So if you have a small community of very specific people, social media is the way to do it. If you have a large community with a number of different people and you don't want to spend, you know, what these brands are spending to be mass media, digital social media is the way. So how do you leverage that? Now you have more time spent and more eyeballs in social with your brand. So we have some other examples here that are really good in lower barrier of entry. Obviously, you know, these also vary in scale, But it's really interesting for you to see how something that's quite simple can lead to good results, right? So the first one is in India, where they created a TikTok challenge, almost like a viral challenge that happened in there to help people understand how to wash their hands, right? And that thing alone generated over 27 billion views on TikTok. Obviously, views on TikTok is kind of like a weird metric, but it just says that, you know, it had scale. There was a lot of engagement there. The same thing happened in I think it was Indonesia, where the government created a jingle to teach little kids how to wash their hands, and the thing blew up and people recorded songs about it. So there are low barrier of entry ways that you can still help your community. Go to the next slide. This one is the one that I mentioned earlier in the shot on an iPhone, and then shot an iPhone at home, right? This is how Apple is helping people kind of share out and find that belonging and still helping the physiological need of staying at home, right? So shot an iPhone at home. And then the next slide is really interesting from Nike, right? Because Nike is always really active in this side of, you know, like humanitarian crisis or social crisis. You know, if you ever deemed playing in front of millions around the world, now's your chance. So you're taking something that, you know, it's usually impossible, and then allowing people to take advantage of it. And you see like the number of different lives that people are broadcasting right now is incredible, right? And Nike really taking advantage of that. And then they also did that for the current social moments. You know, I think it's for the first time ever. Don't do it. You know, it's quite an interesting a point of view that they're having. Again, low barrier of entry. You know, the next one is an interesting, also a kind of health conscious application, right? And it's through a filter in WhatsApp that tells you how often you're touching your face, right? So again, you know, that's something that you could execute fairly easily. And then put it out there and see if it picks up any steam, if you have a specific audience in a specific platform that you want to target, right? And that's quite interesting on how you approach it.
I think that's for the young audience is just spot on, because like tell your kid not to put their hands on your face, right? Like that could
yeah,
be
exactly.
helpful.
Exactly. And this is a platform, Snapchat, that's very focused towards the younger demographic. So it makes sense for them to be there and to be with that message there. So what this all means is that like the principles or the rules that guide social media should be the same ones as you've seen, you know, in the 10 different buckets and in the 6 different principles that we talked about, but just activated in a way that's much more local, right? And then, you know, as things return to normal, how can you use that behavior change, which is likely to stay for a little bit, to still continue to push these principles? We have a few examples of what not to do, and you see these are from big brands or small brands, but they're really about going against some of those things that we talked about, and especially in the acts, not action, not ads. So it's action, not ads. So in the next one, you looked at McDonald's and what they did. And one thing I want to say, like, if you're sticking to your principles, you shouldn't fear what the backlash is, right? So do what your brand thinks it's right and what you guys, and then, you know, if you're always going to have naysayers, you're always going to have, it's very polarizing nowadays. So stick to like these principles that are not going to get you in trouble. You know, they attempted to separate their logos, right, to signify social distancing, and they got in trouble for doing that. And I think in the next slide, you see there are a number of brands that had that happen, right? McDonald's, Volkswagen, Audi, everybody kind of, I think that the Olympics did it, Coca-Cola did it. You know, I think that everybody did this thing, but it's very surface level, right? It's very just, hey, here's me trying to get some attention out of a situation that's a real situation. So it doesn't take anything from a brand perspective to get this done. Everybody can do it, and it doesn't really mean anything. There's no real action behind just that. On the next slide, you see, you know, Popeye's Chicken was giving away free Netflix passwords to help people stay at home, but they were doing it in a very self-serving way. So like I said earlier, like usually marketing is very self-serving, and how can you take that principle that you always held true to, like, okay, I need to further my brand, to really talk about how do you further others, right? And you'd see some examples of that, you know, and something that you have to keep in mind and you have to practice. You know, fried chicken and chill. At the surface level, it makes sense because you're inserting the brand in a national conversation. But then when you look after the first surface, you know, when you start looking underneath what that means, you know, it's self-serving. So you should try to stay away from that. The next one is Coca-Cola. I think it kind of talks a little bit about the same principle that we were talking about. It's very self-serving. There's no real action behind it. I looked at a comment. Is like, okay, Coca-Cola, you're talking about recently, right? With the social and the Black Lives Matter aspect, is like Coca-Cola is talking about it. Let's look at their executive leadership and see how they're playing diversity into their own ranks. So, you know, brands get in trouble when they're not living what they're advocating. They're not being authentic. And this is a really, the next one is really a funny one from, not a funny one, but like a interesting one from Yelp, where during, Yelp has obviously restaurants reviews and all that. And as you'd land on the page from a restaurant, you would be asked to donate money, but it wasn't going towards the restaurant. It was going through Yelp, and then Yelp would distribute it. So they were taking advantage of a property that's a consumer-owned property to feed their whole, you know, corporate goals. So obviously they got in trouble for doing that. So again, you know, really try to live like good principles. Think of it as a humanitarian crisis and an economic crisis second. Understand that brands that are active in these times have a lot to gain, but you need to make sure that you're doing things that mean something for you. On the next slide, you know, it's a lot more of the same types of examples, right? Like Allbirds, which is a shoe company, you know, got in trouble for trying to say that every shoe that you buy is going to go towards a COVID, somebody that's fighting COVID. They got overwhelmed by the number of orders. Then they're asking for more money to fulfill that promise. So really kind of not taking advantage or not understanding the scale that some of these actions can take. So, you know, in the next slide, you're looking at, even if your intent is really good, and I think that all of these ideas have really good intentions, right? Like at first you're like, okay, yeah, let's make sense. And you're kind of like in the middle of it. There's not a ton of understanding of what the context is, of what the plan is, and what is the social economic behavior that's happening. So brands are like, yeah, let's take advantage of this. And then, you know, a week later, it becomes, the whole world changes, and you're like, wow, I shouldn't have done that, but I did at the time. So, you know, make sure that you're trying to do things that are meaningful, they'll provide tangible help. Don't just say that you're going to help. Like, make sure that you're able to put some skin in the game. And then really see if you're informing or communicating, or instead of being self-serving, right? So I think that the gift that Bruna shows here is really fitting. It's like, seemed like a good idea at the time. So even as the world changes around you, make sure that your principles are right and would be right in any one way, right? So try to stick to your guns, go back to your principles, understand what they are, and then use that as a filter as you put out communication. So I think that wraps it for us. You know, thanks for the time. Thank you, Bruna. And you know, we can open for Q&A.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Bruna. This was great. We do have a question here. So these are great strategies to help the community on COVID-19 related matters, but could be some marketing strategies to continue selling your product service without sounding inconsiderate of the moment that we are going through. So how would you advise brands to do that, you know, selling what they actually set themselves to sell, and not only something related to COVID without being insensitive?
Yeah. I think our presentation touched a lot on this. Obviously, some examples like are more like are harder to implement, but I think people really are more conscious these days, and they go for brands that actually like engage with with what is happening in the world, like with all the crises that we are living now, with like COVID, Black Lives Matter, like people look for brands that are actively engaged and doing something for your community. I think obviously you should keep trying to sell your product, and like it's how you make your money, right? And how you can actually help other people. It's like you need to sell your product, but it's just thinking about what's the right message to put out there, you know, like how can you be relevant, do something, but like just try to be conscious of what is happening in the world. Do you want to add something there, Faye?
Yeah, I think I agree, Bru. You know, I think that this is a great question, and it really kind of goes at the center of like, okay, I know what is right for me to do from a social, economic, or from a humanitarian perspective, but I still have to meet these sales goals or whatever it may be. I think what this helps is to put into context what's happening out there in the consumer base, and how can you take these behaviors and apply to how you can add value to those things, right? So continue to sell your products, but frame your pitch or your product in a way that's going to actually help the current state of the community, right? You have a number, you probably have a very small community or whatever the size, but like understand what their needs are, and then try to overlap that with your economic needs, right? So focus on value creation for the whole community with your product. I think that's a great question. Is like, you know, I want to make sure that these ideas obviously are always also serving the brand, are also keeping the brand top of mind, making the brand relevant in the consumer's mind. All these pieces in the consumer's life is getting share of mind, is getting share of wallet. All those pieces are still there, but the brand is finding a way to do that in a way that's not only self-serving to them. They're serving the community, and by serving the community, they get the return. I think that's kind of the main point here, is not talking necessarily just about brand, me, my product. Is okay, what's happening here? How can I overlap what's happening there with the product that I'm selling, and then bring that forward?
Yeah, and to be honest, like one of like the first charts that I talk you guys through is that consumers actually, they expect brands to keep talking or, you know, communicating during this crisis. They don't expect brands to just go dark. It's just a matter of like tailoring the message so it's right. So it's okay to be out there and to say things, just really tailor and think of your message so it's not self-promoted and just like, hey, here's my product, you know.
Okay, thank you. So one of our participants here is asking if you guys have any strategies for startups with little capital.
That's for you, Faye.
That's a $10 million question.
No, I come from the startup world. My startup didn't have necessarily little capital, but I have, you know, I'm in a couple of different things that are, you know, kind of in that same world. So I appreciate the question. And I think it's you know, kind of the same principle. And what we talked about is focusing on how, you know, what your community is, right? So making sure that you don't have to have 1 million advocates from day one. You need to have, you know, 10, 15, 20, and then sustain that growth until you can start scaling, right? So focusing on the community, going small, making sure that they have all the support from you and that you're solving their problems is super important. And then once you have enough momentum that you can scale up, then that's amazing. That's where you want to be. But I think if you don't have capital to scale, you know, focus on that community, making sure that they're the ones that are becoming advocates for you, and then you can scale, right? At Letgo, we did a workshop with a few of the early employees from Instagram, and they talked about how they really grew their community, right? If you looked at how curated some of these hashtags around Instagram were, right? They were really beautiful pictures and really focused on photographers first and creating these beautiful photographies. So everybody that was like, oh my God, Instagram is the app where you see amazing photos. So they really focused on that community and grew it organically. And then it was time for them to scale up, right? So just try to focus on what is the community that you're serving, and give them everything that you have.
Yeah, I think scale is the right word, because like probably if you are a startup, you don't have panels at Times Square to give to your community or to put a message out there, but you have your social media channels. So what can you do to help like there using the what you own and like what you have right now? What are the things that you can do to help people and to help your community? And it's about like thinking as well on the long term. So if you help now where people are in need, and like, you know, you connect with your consumers in a meaningful way right now, they will remember you later and it will bring you return. It's like, it's pure, you know, brand building.
Okay, beautiful. To our next one. When major news expose a company's lack of social responsibility during a crisis, can advertisements revert the negative views or worsen? For example, Amazon advertisements about caring about their workers, but the news are showing that they really don't care about the workers.
Yeah, personally, I think it worsened. Like, I think you really need to mean like no one, like there are the news, social media, it's out there. People will find out if you are not, you know, being honest. And I think I'm gonna say like I buy on Amazon. I'm a really like I need Amazon, but do I love the brand? I don't know, you know, because it's they don't live up to what they say, or what the thing, you know, the things they do don't live up to what we really need right now. So I think advertising when you don't mean it's just making it worse. Like you need to walk the talk. You can't only talk. No one is naive.
I 100% I agree with that. I think advertising alone is not going to fix the majority of your problems, much less, you know, if you're not doing it. I think that in the case of Amazon, you know, it's a little bit weird because they're such a big company and they have like a number of different people. There's things that are going viral that you see what are, you know, Jeff Bezos' responses and how he acts. So it's a weird example, but I think that in general, don't try to buy out of your negative publicity, because it usually is worse, right? You're putting your name against a very terrible cultural backdrop, so you don't want to associate that.
Okay.
And after we have a question that came by email to us from Valmor Brasauer, one of our board members. He first wanted to congratulate the speakers for a job well done, an excellent presentation. Second, he wants the speakers to comment on the approach, what and how much in terms of branding and marketing small and medium-sized companies should go do inside, and how much should they go to outside for advertising, brand marketing, and specialized agencies.
Oh, whether you create your content inside, like in-house, or you go to an agency. Well, that's a big question. I come from agencies, so I'm in the agency world. So I will obviously tell you that you should go to an agency. No, but I mean, there are merits on both. Like, I think like, first of all, internally, like your own employees and your workforce, like they are already a communication vehicle. Like everything that they tell, it's on their social channels, or the way they talk about your company, it's already a form of advertising. So that's one thing. Now, developing like ads or social media internally, like it really depends on how much you have to invest. Creativity, like just from my own experience, creative agencies, they just inspire creativity. Like we have a different way of working. We are way less formal than you are like in a company. And that helps with creativity. Like you have the best talent at the agency, because it's just, I'm not gonna lie, it's just more fun, you know, to work in an agency. So the best talents are in an agency. But there are things, so I would say for like, if you have a lot of media money, like a lot of money to put behind media, and you're going to invest big time on, you know, putting your message out there, I personally think it's worth hiring an agency that will, you know, think all the way through with the drive, like write a proper strategy for your brand, think about every single channel, how that can be applied, and what's the kind of creativity or what's the kind of the tone that goes with your brand. There's a lot of things that you need to think of before you put a message out there. But for smaller things, if you don't have a lot of media investment to put on media, then I think it's worth doing internally. And if you have the right people to do it, like, why not? It's all about, you know, finding the balance and what is right for the message that you want to put and how much you have to invest.
I'll second what Bruna is saying. I think creativity is important. You know, agencies usually have a lot of that to go around. I think a good formula for you to keep in mind is the, and Bruna's going to hate that I'm going to say this, but is a working dollar versus non-working dollar. And what we call a working dollar is a bought media impression. So if you're spending, and non-working dollar would be agency costs. So if you're spending, let's say $10 million or investing $10 million in your brand, it is kind of in your best interest to spend $1.5 million into creating the assets, the strategy, the communication that you're going to spend $10 million on. You know, so that's the type of breakdown that we do. If you're spending, you know, $10,000, $20,000 in media, or if you have a marketing budget that's around $50,000, you don't want to spend $25,000 of that on agency or creative. So you have to keep in mind that what you want as a brand is to have reach. If you're having scale reach, eventually you want to make sure that you have the right communication, that the quality is great, that it's all kind of aligned with the users that you're trying to talk to. So I think that the 10%, 10-15% non-working dollar versus the working dollar is an important equation, or kind of a rule of thumb to keep in mind.
Just following on the small business area, do you guys see any agencies doing any work like to help small business? Because the small business obviously doesn't have the budget of a large corporation. So is there anything done in that sense?
Totally. At TBWA, we did a campaign that basically we didn't charge. We have a lot of pro bonos in the agency. And recently we'd create this campaign for Live Nation, like because of all the concerts, all the shows, the theater, everything that is being canceled. We created a campaign to go to put on TV, like it aired on TV, it aired on social media, but just telling people that, you know, we're closed for the moment, but that they can keep booking for the future and things like that. So this is one example. We are, like, the agency is also doing a lot of things for Black Lives Matter, for the Black Lives Matter movement. We are talking to all our clients to see if they can donate a part of their media to the cause and to help, you know, diversity and inclusivity. We are treating it as a client of the agency and creating, you know, comms strategy just to help communicating the cause. So I think all the agencies, and that, like, I can only speak for TBWA, but all the agencies are doing things like that, I believe.
But I think if you're talking, you know, I think Bruna is being humble because TBWA is a huge agency, right? It's probably one of the biggest agencies in the world. And like, if you're talking about, you know, small businesses and how small businesses are using a little bit agencies that are on a smaller scale than TBWA, I think there are a number of agencies, and you really need to look at, you know, who's doing work that you like, and how much are they willing to charge and how much you're willing to spend. I think that you know, there are a number of amazing agencies that are smaller scale and that can help you out. It's really about you figuring out, you know, a style that you like, a brand that's work that is relevant to you as a brand, to you as a company, and then seeing what type of overlap you need to have. But there's a number out there, you know, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah. The other thing that the agency did was for Brooklyn Film Festival. Again, we partner with the festival to communicate the festival for the first time. It had to be online, and all the small, like the directors, the new directors that are coming up, it's their moment to shine, so they would be affected. So we created a campaign with them to make sure that everyone that we were driving people to the online festival and that we could help somehow.
We have one more question here. So how can the companies measure the effectiveness of their advertisements when kind of everybody's quarantined?
Oh, I think the measurements and the KPIs remains the same. I mean, we measure, and Faye, you can talk more about that from a social perspective, but we measure like the results on our communications by the same way. So we have research to see how people are receiving it. We have like click-throughs, like we have all the regular measurements that we measure in a non-quarantine time. It will just depend like on what is your communication and how you guide your media plan to make sure that you are touching on the right channels for the quarantine times.
Agree. You know, I think, you know, how do you measure effectiveness? That's such a difficult way to approach it, right? Because you have communication effectiveness, which is what Bruna is talking about. And, you know, you're talking about reach and you're talking about positive sentiment, how people are reacting. And then you have social media effectiveness, that's engagement, likes, all time spent, all those things. And then you have business effectiveness and how is advertising helping your business? So I think that the question really should be flipped on its head, right? Like, what is your objective with your advertising? Mm-hmm. First, you know, like, is your advertising solely to drive conversions and drive business? Then you know how to measure that. Is your advertising to be top of mind? Then you know how to measure that. Is your advertising objective to be, you know, X? Then you're going to be able to measure against it, right? But you need to start from something that you want to accomplish, an objective. And then the advertising is a piece of it that you're going to know how to measure based on what is that ultimate objective.
Okay. We have one more. How to test the wording in a campaign in this time when you can easily or may offend some communities, even worldwide, or be misinterpreted?
Well, how you can test, again, it's quite, it depends on how much you have to invest on your testing, what material you are testing. Is it a social media? Is it not? I think, like at the agency, like we work with very big brands that go to like big research companies and just find, you know, and pre-test whatever we want to put out to see how the message resonates. There are smaller institutes as well that do this, that do this type of research. Like if you are a startup, just maybe ask your friends, you know, ask around to see how people see it. Just get scrappy with it. And if you think, and to me, there is like a lot of like, what does your gut tell you? You know, you always should listen to your gut, and if something smells, probably it doesn't smell right, it's probably not. And like, just use your network. If you are a small brand and you just want to know how it's going to sound, like, ask your network. Don't be scared to ask. Like, people love getting involved on these things.
Yeah, I second that. Ask your network, you know, and make sure that the feeling and the wording is authentic to you. You know, you need to double check these things, you know.
Yeah, before you put a post out there on your Instagram, you can always like go and just post to 5 of your 10 of your friends and say, what do you guys think of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, before scaling
it. There's also like the formal ways as well, as Bruna is saying, you know, like you can hire somebody to go out there and test communication parameters and making sure that your territory resonates with your user base. And then, you know, but at the highest level, you should just use your network.
Okay. I think, guys, anybody have any more questions for Fernando, Bruna?
Looks like that.
I have one question. Sorry. So how do you see like we're talking about how the brands, you know, change, like, you know, Ambev in Brazil, you know, they started producing hand sanitizers. How do you kind of like, first, how do you do that without affecting your identity as a brand, right? Like Louis Vuitton, who is a luxury brand producing surgical masks, whatever. How do you do that without affecting your brand? And how are you gonna do in the future? You know, it's like, what is it? Is it gonna suddenly stop? You know, how do you kind of slowly stop producing, you continue producing if you see that it is actually, you're making money on that, but that doesn't go with your branding. So just.
Yeah, I don't think it changes your identity. I think if anything, it helps building on it. You know, it just helps show your good side. People have like, a lot of people have, oh, big corporations, they're not nice, they don't do good to the planet, all those that conversation that you know about. But I think when you do something like that, it just help building your identity, because you are doing something that is just good. And then it depends, like I don't know how the hand sanitizer business is gonna be for ABI. I have a feeling that at some point they are gonna stop producing it, just because it's not core to their business. But right now they had the chance to help people and to help the world, and they did it, and they took the chance. So I really value them for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. It goes back also to the pyramid, right? You don't want like, you don't need this wishful things that you want, your bag, your expensive bag. It goes back to the bottom of your needs. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Very good questions. I hope like we managed to respond them. We talk a lot, so
Great.
Well,
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Very good. Well,
Thank
thank you
you
very
so
much, Fernando, Bruna, and Renata, for a great and entertaining panel. And thank you all for joining. Our next webinar will take place next Thursday, June 18th, 10 a.m. COVID-19 Next Steps, the legal impact on Brazil of government and multilateral policies. Thank you all for attending, and stay healthy and in good spirits.